When I invested my first $1,000 in my 20s, I didn't buy stocks, I actually bought old clothing. And this decision led me to making way more money than the stock market could at this stage of my life. If you clicked on this video, I understand that you're most likely in your 20s looking for other ways to grow your income other than working your 9 to 5 job. As well as you might even have $1,000 sitting in your pocket and you're ready to spend it wisely. Well, I'm going to tell you exactly how I invested my first $1,000 and why it was one of the best financial decisions that I've ever made in life so far. So about 2 years ago, I was 23 years old living in a 2-bedroom apartment with my best friend. We both worked together full-time at a local streetwear shop. It was a retail job, so we weren't really getting paid a ton of money. If anything, we were almost living check to check, and at the time I had rent to pay for, my car, groceries, and some other smaller expenses as well. I remember at this time feeling really stuck and almost as if I couldn't really get anywhere. My income wasn't growing, I didn't really have too many goals, and I was basically living my life on autopilot. But what I did know is that I wanted this all to change. I've always been a pretty ambitious person who loves setting goals for themselves and also just urging to always be productive in a way. I couldn't really take living life on autopilot anymore, so I know I needed to make a big change for myself. So like anyone else, I started brainstorming. How can I grow my income as fast as possible? I always heard the saying, you need to spend money in order to make money, and I thought to myself, well, I only have $1,000 to spare. What can I spend this on in order to make more money? And honestly, at the time, I had next to no knowledge towards investing, and I probably couldn't even tell you what an ETF was. So investing into the stock market was never really an option that even crossed my mind. And just a quick side note, even if I knew what I knew today about investing into the stock market, I still probably wouldn't do it. At least not if I only had $1,000 spare dollars. Even getting a good sized annual return of something like 15% would have only made me $150 in a whole year. And honestly, that seems pretty inefficient to me. So let me tell you what I did instead to make 33 times that amount monthly. Before I tell you, I gotta rewind a bit so it makes more sense. Back in high school, I used to go thrifting for vintage clothing. I'd drive around store to store after school and spend my hard-earned part-time job money when I came across something I found cool. Eventually, my collection grew more and more, so I came up with the idea to resell some. I remember making an Instagram account and a Snapchat story to list vintage clothing I had for sale. Every now and then, the odd person would message me about an item that I had for sale wanting to buy it. And slowly I started to sell my collection piece by piece. I realized my profit margins were pretty high. Every piece I sold roughly had about a 3x to 4x markup. So years passed by and every now and then I would do this on the side, but never really seriously got into it. I was in college and working part-time, so I never really made up enough time to pursue this fully. For a while I had this quote-unquote side hustle sitting on the back burner. Fast forward to when I was 23 and working at the streetwear store while living with my best friend. On weekends, we would do these pop-up markets that vendors would gather up for to sell stock to customers. And I remember bringing some of my own stock one weekend. I specifically cropped these button-up shirts because that's how I wore them, and I remember more and more people were starting to get into the crop clothing, at least in the fashion world. None of the other vendors really had this idea yet. Everyone was selling your average vintage clothing that you could realistically buy anywhere. Needless to say that my crop button-ups were a hit. As soon as someone came into the booth I was at, they went straight towards the button-ups. In that weekend market, word spread so much that even a bunch of vendors were interested in buying one for themselves. And by the end of it all, I had almost none left. One of the vendors who owned their own store realized how successful I was with these shirts and asked if I wanted to consign them at his store. Consigning in this case essentially means putting my product on display in their store, and when an item sells, they get a bit of profit from it. So of course I said yes. The only thing I really had to do now was get more product. From the money I made over that weekend and the extra cash that I had, so roughly $1,000, maybe even less to be honest with you, I went out and I got more product. I bought as much variety as I could and put the effort into wash, crop, and also tag them so that they're ready to be sold in the store. I remember at first I was probably selling them for about $30 each, and I think I had to pay roughly a 10% consignment fee. The first week I had them in the store, they nearly sold out once again. People loved the crop button-ups, and honestly they just couldn't get enough of them. At that point, I was almost getting paid weekly and just kept repeating the process. Get money, buy product, sell product. It was that simple. This was now my official side hustle. It didn't take too much time out of my day, and the product was quietly selling in the background. I think the way that I treated the side hustle was also a very smart decision, so let me just explain that a bit for you. All of the money I was making was being reinvested into buying more product or any tools that were necessary to help me scale the business. I could have went out and spent the money I was making on myself, but I knew that really wasn't going to get me anywhere in the long run. But eventually, like all good things, this one came to an end. The store I was consigning at realized how much money they could be making from this idea, and they essentially stole it and started doing it themselves. Luckily for me, I had even more extra cash now, maybe a few grand to say the least. And this is when I decided to make the official side hustle even more official. My best friend, who I was living with and working with, had experience in selling products online on websites such as eBay and even Etsy. I also had experience within this field, and that's when I came up with a life-changing idea for him and I. We decided to start our own online store that would sell vintage clothing, including my button-ups. Using the money I earned from the previous strategy, I reinvested it all into this business. We bought products, we bought online tools and subscriptions, mainly just to help us sell online, and we bought whatever else we needed in order to make it all work. The timing was also impeccable. We started everything at the end of October, so this was right in time for Christmas shopping. Not only that, but we really took our time to learn the business in and out. Within a few months, we were doing better than a lot of other online accounts, and we were making some good money. Most of the money we made went right back into the business. We knew the more we did this, the faster it can scale and eventually make us even more money. Luckily, we both had our 9-to-5 jobs, paying all of our expenses. Eventually, we had to shut this operation down because we had a different opportunity come up. We got offered ownership at a different store and decided to take it and shut down our side business. Unfortunately, things didn't really work out there, and eventually we had to restart all over again. And I remember at this point, I felt like everything was just a waste of time, and this was honestly a hard time in my life. Regardless, that's what I invested my first $1,000 into. I invested into a system that would generate me more money way quicker than the stock market ever could with such little amount. As of today, we have our new business up and running that generates us typically over $5,000 every month. We barely put any time into it, and it's basically just working passively. We also don't put as much money back into the business because we're comfortable where we're at. We take a profit for each of us at the end of every single month, and I'm personally investing that money into the stock market now. So after all this, my advice for you is take your $1,000 and create a side business for yourself, or pay someone to learn a skill that you can turn into a side business. This will make you more money than anything else, in my opinion, at this stage. There are so many different side hustles you can be doing, even if it's as basic as mowing someone's lawn. Maybe you have a certain skill already that you can monetize, and if you do, that's a great start. Another piece of advice is to start small. You don't really need to create this insane game plan to make you $1 million by the end of the year. That's super unrealistic and unlikely to happen. Real wealth is built slowly. Don't fall for any of those get-rich-quick schemes. The goal is to create a small system that can generate a little amount of cash flow for you. Once you got that down, you can turn it up a notch. Make the sacrifice to reinvest your money back into the system that you made so that you can scale it faster. Then when you're comfortable with how much the output is, figure out where you want to put that money so you can grow it even more. I personally would start with the stock market after that, but paying for more skills wouldn't be a bad idea either. At the end of the day, it's all up to you. Everyone has different goals. I hope that my story inspired you a bit to do something similar to what I did. Like I said, it was one of the best financial decisions I've ever made that still generates me money every month. And better yet, this is actually taking me to the next step of growing my wealth. Now, if you clicked on this video thinking that you could magically put your $1,000 into something and then it's just going to grow an enormous amount, it's very unlikely to happen. And like I said before, even having a good year of a 15% annual return from the stock market is only going to grow that by $150. And yes, I understand how compounding works and it'll compound over time, but this is just a very slow way of doing it. I'm no financial advisor, but in my opinion, I would rather create something that generates me cash flow. The more cash flow that you can generate, the faster you can invest that into the stock market after, if that's something that you wanted to do. So to wrap this video up, I invested my $1,000 into a side hustle. I then took that side hustle and turned it into a system where I can generate a monthly cash flow. And like I said, this system is generating me a lot more cash flow than the stock market ever could at this point. And with the cash flow that's coming in now, I can upgrade my system, take those profits, and put it into the market. And if you're curious about what my strategy is now, I would be sure to check out this video here. It talks all about my side hustle strategy. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them below. Good luck out there. If I can do this, then you can for sure do it as well. Be sure to subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next one.